Hi, welcome to part 2 of understanding competency data. In the first video, we talked about results we get from the top tier competency, the second tier objective, and the third tier of your hierarchy, your activities. And then we looked at the class progress tab up here to see a general summary for the class, as well as clicking on student links to see competency results for each student. In this video, we're going to look more specifically at data we can get from quizzes. So I'm going to navigate to a quiz within my hierarchy here really quick to show you. And go to structure. So you can see two different activities associated with this objective. There's a Dropbox for a studio project option or a quiz for their final quiz. So I want to look at the quiz results just to demonstrate again. And if I click on this little icon here with the ruler and the check mark, it'll bring up the results for that particular quiz activity. And we saw this in the first video, so I won't go into too much more detail here, but you have your students and you have your completed status. So let me just close out of here. Now we're going to navigate to quizzes to look at data more specifically associated with the quiz. So I'm going to go to this little caret by my quiz here, and I'm going to go to statistics. And here we get three tabs: user stats, question stats, and question details. So here, the first tab is more of a general overview. If I had a plethora of students, I would see possibly more of a bell curve shape, hopefully. And I would see, where students fall within that. I get a nice class average here, and then I get a breakdown of the individual students and their average grade on the quiz. I can export this to a CSV or an Excel if I want to. On question stats, I get a little bit more detailed information per question. Whether or not I tag objectives through the quiz editor, I still get data on every question, because I purposefully, I think it was like the last 4 questions, I did not add them as objectives through the quiz editor, and this data still showed for that. So, but anyway, you can see the average grade for each question. And then this discrimination index has to do with the difficulty of the question. If you click on this link, it explains that more, what that means here. So it's how well a question differentiates between high and low performance. So high values are good and low values are a bad question. So that can kind of help you determine which questions you might want to update. And then question details gives you even more specific information on each question. It shows you not only like the correct answer, the percentage of students that chose that, but also the percentage of students that chose an incorrect answer. So you can kind of see maybe students all missed a particular question, and then you could see if this wrong answer was more popular than the right answer, is that mean you have to revise your question or possibly some content to make that more clear. So that can be helpful information to you. So that's pretty much that. Now I'm going to go to I'm going to go back to quizzes. I think if I click on there. Okay, great. So I'm back at my in the quiz editor, and so you can see here's the properties where I set up all the quizzes. Now if I click on objectives, I can see where I associated learning objectives by clicking here, and I showed that in a previous video. And then to see results, first I had to set up a report, because I was wondering, I'm like, what is the point of adding these associated learning objectives? It didn't seem to give me any data, because all the data I just showed you showed up whether I had these associated learning objectives here or not. So I'm like, what is the point of doing that? Well, the point of doing that is you get more specific data, but first I had to set up a report to see it. So I just clicked on Add Report, and you can click any of these settings you want. It gives you like this default when you click a new report. So you type a name for it here, and then you can click on question details and then include all the data you want to see. And user statistics, you can click what you want the users to see, and so then you can save that. So that's what I did to create this report here. So now if I go to objectives, it gave me, and I set up an assessment method for those objectives. Now I can view the statistics for each one of these objectives. And I couldn't do that if I didn't associate the objectives through the quiz editor. So now I get these statistics, so I can see the average, the lowest score and the highest score associated with this objective, and then I can see the students at the bottom and the score they got just for the questions I associated with that objective. So for this one, I think there might have been like 3 questions or something, and they had different point values. So so you can see this student got all the questions for that objective right, and so did this one, but this student only got half the total points associated with those 3 questions. So they got a lower mark for that. Okay, so that's that specific objectives activity stats. One more thing I want to show you is, so we clicked here and we went to view statistics. If we go to view results, this is interesting because it'll show me which students earned that objective on the quiz. So this will show me maybe a student passed the quiz, like before when I pulled up the let me see. If I go to my quiz activity under competencies, let's see here. Okay, if I look at this quiz, I can see that that student 1, or this regular navigator student 1, completed the quiz with a score of an 82.8%. Well, that's great. But if I look at this particular this particular objective's results, I can see that navigator, he did not, he only got about one credit point towards meeting that objective. So he missed almost every question in the Easter Island section. So that would tell me that the student might need to go back and review this objective right here. So I can kind of notice patterns that, you know, even though the student did very well on the quiz, it's interesting to note that all the questions the student missed on that quiz came from this objective. Now I'm going to show you maybe even more efficient way to see the same information I just talked about, to see whether or not students met a specific objective you've associated through your quiz editor with your quiz. If I navigate back to the competency home here and I find my quiz in my structure, and then I find the link associated with the quiz, and I check the results like we've seen before. I see my student's name and whether or not they completed the quiz. And if we recall, this first student here has a completed status on the quiz, but then I noticed they missed all the questions associated with a particular objective. So if you maybe notice a score that's a little bit on the lower side of passing, you might want to, when you're observing your students, check those particular students out to see which objectives maybe they did not meet on the quiz associated with a specific set of questions. So here, if I scroll down in my hierarchy under end of module assessments, I have my ethnographic art final, and I have here the quiz associated with that. So I see the student passed the quiz and met the threshold for the overall score. But if I go up into my art hierarchy under my art history competency here and ethnographic arts, I can see all the main objectives that I associated through the quiz editor, and those objectives correspond to a certain set of questions. Here's the link for my quiz, and we can see the student got 100% of the questions in that section right, and the required threshold here, so they got a green check mark for that. Intro to ethnographic art, you can see here is the associated objective here, and the student earned 100% of the questions for that particular objective, so they got a green check mark. African art, you don't see the quiz link showing up because I specifically did not associate this objective through the quiz editor to show you what happens when you don't do that. So if I didn't associate any objectives with that quiz, I wouldn't be able to see that specific level of data. So I would only see that the student passed the quiz or did not pass the quiz, but I wouldn't know which specific area of the quiz the student had the most difficulty with. But for Native American art, you can see the quiz, that objective was associated through the quiz editor, and I can quickly see that they met the threshold for that level. In fact, they got all the questions in that section right. And then Easter Island here, they missed almost every single question, so they did not. So I kind of like this view a little better when I'm trying to figure out whether or not my students met a certain objective that I associated through the quiz editor. I hope that makes sense. It basically shows the same information that we saw here when we looked at the results. It's just now we can see all the objectives together in one page. So instead of filtering through each one of these for each student, we can see it, we can filter the student and then see all the objectives at once with the other view. So I hope you found that helpful, and good luck setting up your quizzes.